So this is a patient of uveitis who has also developed cataract, and what you can notice is that there is a 360 degrees posterior synechia, as well as there is peripheral anterior synechia, and I'm putting in cohesive viscoelastic inside the anterior chamber. The chamber is shallow, and the spatula will be used to release the peripheral anterior synechia in the areas that that have the synechia, and then using this Couglin's hook, I'm trying to release this membrane in the pupillary area and also check uh, where the membranes are and what needs to be done. So as I plan to use the Hex ring in this particular case, I'm first doing a stretch pupilloplasty using a wire dialer and a Coughlin hook, putting in viscoelastic again and again as the chamber is shallow, making the 2.2 main incision with a keratome, and taking the BX pupil expander and trying to engage the first of the flanges in the pupil. But this is a rigid pupil, and also there is shallow anterior chamber, so it's not going to be a straightforward implantation of this Hex ring. So one of the flanges goes in, and now the second one. So in spite of the stretch pupilloplasty, the pupil is still on the rigid side, and you can appreciate that there is a thin whitish membrane in the pupillary area, almost half of it, and the BX becomes deformed, again telling us that there is still some amount of rigidity of the pupil, and it's not going to dilate the pupil evenly. So no amount of pushing is going to help, and I want this ring to be in the center and not uh, where it is right now. So I'm injecting visco and I'm pushing the BX, but then I decide to do a microsphincterotomy just to make sure that I have a better dilatation, a more regular one, and a more central placement of the BX. So I'm making these microsphincterotomies and trying to stretch the pupil. So not a quite central one, but still. And this is a trick I learned from Dr. Suvan Bhattacharjee of staining the anterior capsule with trypan blue under the viscoelastic, and you can see that I have got a good enough stain. And since I want my rexus to be a central one, I'm going to push this BHEX flange to give me better visibility. So uh, the the ring not only dilates the pupil, but you can use a second instrument to push the ring in order to give a better visibility. So started with the cystotome, but then decided to use a microrhexis forceps. And as I said, the anterior chamber is on the shallower side, and I need to keep putting in more and more viscoelastic inside the eye to maintain the anterior chamber, and pushing the BHEX to make it more central, and then completing my rhexis. So that I have a regular rhexis now, a more centrally placed one, and then hydrodissection being performed in multiple quadrants. Aspirating some of the cortex that is there above the nucleus, and now I'm using this Sinski hook to serve as a chopper, and a direct chop is performed. I hadn't done a rotation of the nucleus, and that is why it's not rotating, but nevertheless it does finally. And let's start off by removing this hemi segment that I have chopped. So uveitic cataracts generally tend to be softer, and we would rarely encounter a hard cataract in uveitis. And the management of the nucleus is pretty straightforward. So here the epinucleus also is aspirated, and viscoelastic being placed inside the eye before I remove the phaco tip. Bimanual irrigation aspiration to remove the cortex. In uveitis, one should make sure you don't leave behind any cortex, because that itself can incite inflammation. Change of hands, and once again, using one hand to push the ring, the BHEX ring, to give a better view of the capsular bag. Again, viscoelastic going in the eye to fill the capsular bag, and a foldable intraocular lens is implanted. So whenever one has a BHEX in place, one should make sure that the intraocular lens doesn't open in the anterior chamber, but it goes straight into the capsular bag. And when you do that, the chances of the haptic getting entangled in the BHEX is negated. So now we've implanted the lens, and now we can remove the BHEX and finish this case by removing all the residual viscoelastic from in front and behind the intraocular lens. And one can notice that we don't have a very regular pupil, but still uh, acceptable. And now hydration of the side ports and the main incision, and a very satisfactory outcome in the end. Thank you for watching.